and welcome to another episode of FooBar. Today we are going to talk about Lambda functions URL. That is the simplest way to get an HTTPS endpoint for your Lambda functions. This is an announcement that happened a couple of weeks ago, and I divided this video into 3 parts. The first one is what are functions URL? The second one is when to use it over other alternatives. And finally, I show you how to use it with SAM and also with CDK. So let's get started. Lambda functions are part of the AWS service. You don't need to integrate any other service into this mix to get the HTTPS endpoint. These URLs look something like this, like you can see in screen, and basically they have the URL ID. That is not the function ID, it's something else. Then lambda-url dot the region where you're deploying that on AWS. So that's something how the Lambda URLs look, and you can configure cores to them so you can use them for your web applications. So one function, one URL. Each URL is globally unique, so there is no 2 URLs the same, so this URL ID and region kind of give the mix and interesting look for it, and they are associated to an Lambda alias. So basically, if you don't say anything, it will be associated to the latest, so it will always go to the latest, but this allows you to play with different functions and then different stages of your function. So you might have one function in production with the alias, I don't know, production, and then you might have another one for your staging with the alias staging, and they both have different APIs like endpoints, so you can test and make sure everything is good. So yeah. Also, by having these mechanisms, you can do weighted traffic system and safe deployments. I have videos on how to do that, not with Lambda functions, but with Lambda in general. So you can go and check those out there in the description box, so you can see what I'm meaning in here. But basically, you can start doing a safe deployment by just deploying like your functions in stages, and don't get all the traffic converted into your function in 1 second, and then the URLs can also help you with that. So this is super powerful because we do those things quite often. When it comes to security, Lambda functions URLs provide some security mechanisms. They are not as complicated or as deep as API gateway mechanisms are, because the idea here is to have a simplified URL for simple cases, but you can still control the access of who can invoke this Lambda functions URL. So that is done in 2 ways. The first one is with the auth type. You will see that there is 2 kind of values for that, the AWS IAM or the none. Basically, everybody can do it. And also with resource-based policies that you can attach to your Lambda function. So basically, how you configure these 2 things means how your Lambda URLs can be accessed. So when we talk about the auth type parameter, you will see it when you are configuring your function URL. You can say, okay, only users with permissions on the IAM level are able to access these invoke the functions using this URL. And this is great, for example, if you are using Cognito. And when you're using Cognito, even with guest users or unregistered users, or also with registered users and logged users, you get IAM role, either for authenticated or authenticated. So I have a video where I do this for Amplify. I leave it in the description box, and there you get an IAM role, different one for different cases, and that allows you to invoke the Lambda function. So then basically, if this is not executing in your website, then people will not be able to invoke that function. That's very nice. If you put none, then the Lambda is accessible publicly, and that means that everybody can access it from wherever. However, you can restrict things still from your resource based policy. So yeah, you need to say that this is a public access one. In the example that I will show you, I will be basically doing a public endpoint so you can see it. But if you want me to do some more things with authentication, just let me know. I'm more than happy to play with this and show you more things around the Lambda functions. Also, if you want to do authentication or authorization, you can also do it in the first part of your function. So you don't need to have it in the... So the function will execute, and the first thing you can do is validate a token or do something like that. And if that's not the case, you can exit. So that's something you can do as well. You're still executing the function, but yeah, you can kind of put some control in what the function is doing just by validating something like that. So there's still some security that you can also do. Then when it comes to monitoring, Lambda functions provide some extra metrics to Lambda. So now you will be seeing things like the amount of requests, the latency of the request, and all the 400 and 500 errors, how many of those you are getting. Like you will see with API Gateway as well. It's not that much detail, but at least you get an idea on those basic metrics so you can improve your application. When we talk about limits with Lambda functions, there is the same limits for the functions than to the Lambda function, so that's good. You have a payload of 6 megabytes to pass around. Then there is 1,000 concurrent executions of your function, and you can upgrade it with a ticket to the customer service, and the timeout is a 15-minute timeout like your Lambda function, so that's good. It increased the timeout from API Gateway. And when it comes to pricing, the pricing is included in Lambda, so you don't need to basically pay anything just for using these ones. And now let's talk about the part 2, when to use Lambda functions URLs, because they look very cool and you might be thinking, oh, I don't need API Gateway anymore. But that's not the case. They have different reasons to exist, and I'm pretty sure there will be more and more content coming on when to use one or the other. But let's go in a nutshell why you should use one or the other. Lambda functions URL are great for when you need an URL for a single function, because with API Gateway you can give basically the same URL and just different path to different functions, and that's not something you can do with Lambda functions URLs. Every function gets its own URL, and then they are all kind of living there. So but these are great if you need one public endpoint for your functions and you don't need advanced capabilities that API Gateway provide, like control of the traffic, rate limit, more detailed X-ray, I don't know, some kind of authorizers. I don't know, there's so many features that API Gateway provide. And if you don't need any of those and you need an URL for one Lambda, this is your way. For example, you want to use it for implementing webhooks. API Gateway might not bring you any benefit for doing that. A simple webhook, then you do it through a functions URL, or you need to do a form validator. Maybe an API Gateway is kind of a waste because you are doing one particular thing there. Or individual process, for example, you attach to some button in a very static page. There is not like a REST API or microservice behind it. It's just a function that executes when somebody presses a button, like the form validation. Or you might do it for process big data or ML inference or something that is very particular that you just want to have the endpoint and you don't need a REST API. So this is the simplest way to have an URL. So also this is a great way if you want to start developing an application and you want to start with the bare minimal, you just use the Lambda URLs, and then later you can add API Gateway and it should be pretty straightforward to migrate. There is some difference, but not really much on the way that the event is ingested and the response is created. API Gateway, in the other hand, provides a lot of capabilities, and this is great for your production REST APIs when you need the full-blown capabilities, like you need to scale, you need to have control, you need to monitor, you need to publish, you need your stages, you need that control. Also, when you have multiple Lambda functions all in the same application or microservice, they all share the same URL, they just change the path. That's super nice. And when you need authorizers are an amazing feature from API Gateway. If you don't know what API Gateway authorizers, I have a whole playlist on them, and it's amazing the power that you can do for your security on your API gateways. When you want to validate your request or response using API Gateway and not from your Lambda function, you can also use API Gateway. When you need usage plans, when you need WAF, like the application firewall for your applications, that's something you can also do with API Gateway. So it's not now we just drop API gateway and we move to Lambda functions. No, there are different use cases. This is for the simple examples for the Lambda lith when they're a little monolith and for other use cases. But when we want to do our backend applications, the REST APIs, API gateway is the way to go. Or then AppSync. If you're doing GraphQL, you get similar benefits from AppSync than from API gateway. You get a lot of support and you get a lot of scalability. With functions URLs, it's more simple, it's more on the one function, and it's a different story. But yeah, they're cool. So before going to the third part of the video, and I will show you the demos with SAM and CDK, now is your time to like this video and subscribe. If you're watching all this way here, why you who have not liked my video, it doesn't hurt you and it helps me. So thank you. Let's move on. So let's look at the demos. So for this particular example, I did one project that you will find in GitHub, and this project has like 3 parts. The first one is a CDK, then you have a client that is a web application, super simple React app, and then SAM application. So it's the same kind of thing than with SAM and CDK, because every time I show you a launch, the first comment or message I get is like, can you show me how to do it with CDK? So I'm doing both this time. So the first thing, I will show you the SAM. I will explain you more in the SAM, and then I will show you very briefly the CDK, because they're kind of the same. So in the SAM, we have the template YAML, and there we have one function. So before doing anything, you need to upgrade your CDK and you need to update your SAM depending to the latest version. So make sure that you have that. For SAM is 146, and for CDK, you will need to figure out what is the latest version. So I have a function, and there it's a normal function. This example, you have seen it 20 million times, is my greeter with the function and the database. I usually have an API gateway, a Lambda, and a dynamo table. Now I drop the API gateway and I'm using Lambda functions. So I have, usually I have 2 functions, one that saves the greeting and one that finds the greeter in the greeting in the database. But in this case, I just make one function that handles everything, because with the functions URL, then I will get 2 different URLs and I don't like it. I want to have a little Lambda list with 2 things that this Lambda is doing. So this has a table, and then you can see the function URL config. So this is how we configure the Lambda function URL with no authentication, and then allowing everything on the course, because we can. So it's a very simple thing. Then we have the outputs, and this is a tricky part, because I was like, I want to get the function URL in my CloudFormation outputs. I want to see it when I deploy, because if not, I need to go to the console and look for it. And you know how much I hate going to the console. So yeah, the trick here is to use that my function URL. And how I got that? Well, I went to CloudFormation, I went to the resources that were created, and there I went to the name of the logical resource that was created. Usually the function and the function URL are 2 different CloudFormation resources. So that's why I will see it like my function URL, and then I find the function URL. And if you're doing it with a different name, is the name of the function, then URL in that camel case, and then .function URL, and you will get it. So now I did the research for you. So that's good. Then we have our, we can deploy this and we can see that it works. I will basically fast forward the deployment because you all know how this looks, and we can see what is in the output, and then we can look a little bit in the code, but the code, you know it very well as well. So now when this is deployed, we can see there the URL in the screen is the value, and that's the URL that our Lambda function has now. And then we can go to the code and we can see the code is very, very similar. The only difference is that instead of having 2 functions, I will leave you the repo I always use for this. It's like my first serverless application. It's a super simple app. I use API Gateway, and I want to see how much changes I need to do to this application to use functions URL. So I merge everything in one function. function now. And then I have, if the method is one get or post, then do different things, because the Lambda function URL can get basically any method and can get invoked by any method. And then there is not much changes that you need to do to the API gateway. So the event is more or less the same. The return, the response is more or less the same. So I didn't touch much this code. Then I just trigger that with the Thunder client, and I just put random name, and then I put another name, and I can start seeing that everything is working. So that's good. And if you don't know what Thunder client is, I'll leave you a video with my 5 favorite Visual Studio Code extensions, and as well the serverless console is where I'm going to check all the logs to see that everything is working, and everything is working, so that's good. Another of my favorite extensions for Visual Studio Code. So now that everything looks good, we can go to the AWS console. We can look for that function, and I can show you what you can see. Now you can see that the function doesn't have a trigger. It's no API gateway, but it has a function URL in the side that you can copy and you can execute wherever you want. And there we can go to the configuration, and we can see the function URL and all the configuration for the authentication and for the cores. If we press edit, we can change it. This is infrastructure as code. I don't recommend you to change it from here because then it makes a mess, but you can see everything that you can put. So now let's look quickly to the CDK, and this is a basic CDK application. The code of the function is exactly the same that the one I show you, and the only thing I do is I created a stack with one function and one dynamo, and basically this function I need to create the function URL as a separate component, because as I told you before, functions URL are a different CloudFormation component, and even though in some they are together, in CDK they are separated. And this is the same. I add the function URL to my function, I put the authentication type to none, I add cores, and then basically I do the output as well in the same way. And here is more straightforward because it's that object, the function URL, that I can just get the URL and I can see it in the output. So just deploy this and you will see exactly the same as you do with some. So now let's look a little bit at the front end. This is just to show you how you can use it in a front end. I created a basic React application with like nothing. There's no Amplify here, there's nothing. And I'm using Axios basically to call that Lambda function URL. Why I'm not using Amplify? Well, because Amplify still doesn't have support for Lambda functions URLs, so we need to wait for that. But for now, I just go to my app.js, and there we can see a little bit of the code. I created an AWS config file that you will need to put your endpoint in, and that's your function URL. And then basically this is calling the Axios get with the parameter of the name, and I can get one greet if it was greeted or not. And then the same with the post, and then it just works. So this is how it looks. I put the name there, Manuela, and I check if it was greeted. It takes a while, it's called starting, and then we can check if it's greeted and we can greet them, and very simple drill. So then we can go to the Cloudwatch metrics, and we can see the metrics that this created, this Lambda function. So if we go to Lambda, and we can browse by function name, we can put the function name there, and we can see all the functions, all the metrics that are related to this particular function and the URL. So we can see the URL latency, we can see the count, and we can see the amount of 500 and 400 events. When I was doing this, I was getting them all because I was playing with this thing and I was breaking them. So we can see the graph there of me coding this thing around, and let's make it a little bit bigger. And you can play a little bit with the statistics and how this looks, so this makes sense. I like always to have my sums because it's easier to me to know what is going on in that particular minute. And then we need to just separate the latency because it's a totally different monster. So I will make that thing go to the right. and then this is how our graph looks. We can see that we have many invocations when I was playing with this, and then we can see that there are some errors here and there because I was getting all kind of errors when I was playing. And this is how the graph looks. It doesn't give you a lot of information, but it gives you some context on how your application is working. And that's it for me today. I hope you liked this video. I hope it provides you some information, and I see you next week with another episode of FooBar. Ciao, ciao!